Good morning. Welcome to the Celtic Way Morning Briefing Live. I'm Tony Haggerty, Haggerty10 Twitter handle even, and I'm joined today by Alison McConnell at AliValley76 on her Twitter handle. Morning, Alison. How you doing?
I'm very well, thank you, Tony. Yourself?
Yes, I'm good. As we calm before the storm at Tynecastle tonight, we have written up our predicted lineups, Alison, and I think yourself and myself differ in only one position. I've got Abada wide, and you've got James Forrest wide. But that apart, we've got the same team. Great minds and all that, or full seldom differ. One of the ones, isn't it?
Well, let's see if any of us gets it right.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I think we've gone for Hart, Juranovic, Carter Vickers, Starfelt, Taylor, Hatate, O'Reilly, and Beaton, and Jota, Giakoumakis, Abada, and you've gone Jota, Giakoumakis, and Forrest, haven't you? I think that's, if memory serves, that's correct, isn't it?
It is indeed.
And a must-win game, Alison, for Celtic. We touched upon it yesterday, but they've just got to cope with their injury problems and players on international duty and show they've got some title credentials and mettle.
Yeah, I think it's difficult. I think there's no question you're going without your strongest side available to you. But I think at where Celtic are in terms of their place in the title, I think every game comes into the bracket of must win. And I think you know how fraught Tynecastle can be. I think it's a small stadium, it's a compact stadium, fans on top of you. Hearts have restricted the numbers of Celtic fans that will go through in an attempt to obviously make it as intimidating and as hostile as possible an environment for Celtic to go into. I think obviously Celtic dropped points there on the opening night of the season. I think you know what you're going to expect. You've got players who are in decent form. I think Craig Gordon is compounded everything, you know, in terms of the performances this year. It belies his 39 years. I think he's had an extraordinary campaign to date. I think Barry Mackay has been a particularly good signing for Hearts too. Pace and direct and a bit of trickery. And players like that will relish the occasion tonight. They'll enjoy the chance to go and try and get one over Celtic. But ultimately, if you want to win a title, you want to win championships, you have to go to grounds like Tynecastle and you have to find a way to win. Even when you are hindered in terms of personnel, you have to find a way to win. That's the bottom line just now for Celtic. And I think when you look at the resources and the personnel that are available to them, it still remains a fairly strong starting 11.
Yeah, I'm looking at that. The team that we've both, I'm looking at both teams that we've picked, and yeah, it's still strong. Granted, there could be other vital personnel there, but it's still a strong team. It's not exactly decimated, is it?
No, I think the problem for Ange Postecoglou is the loss of very instrumental and key players who maybe offer you aspects that aren't easily replicated. And I'm thinking of Callum McGregor. I think he's very good at knitting Celtic together from middle to front, from back to middle to front, at directing play. I think a lot of what he does slips under the radar at times. I think he's incredibly influential in the middle of the park, and I think he is a definite miss, a definite loss. Tom Rogic too. I think he's been playing some impressive football this season. You've seen him again come to the fore this term under Postecoglou. I think he is a miss. I think he's a creative player who can be capable of just opening a game up for Celtic. He has that ability just to conjure something out of nothing. I think he will be a loss. But at the same time, I thought, Rio Hatate had a very impressive debut when he played against Hibs last weekend. I think Nir Beaton, his as we spoke of yesterday, has redeemed himself after a fairly inauspicious start this term. And from although Kyogo, I think is also a massive, massive loss. I think he's been talismanic for Celtic this season. I think it's an opportunity for Giakoumakis to go and stake his claim. And the reason I went for Forrest over Abada is I think if Forrest is fit, he's a player who, again, is capable of finding something from nothing.
Yeah.
We saw it in the semi-final against St Johnstone at Hampden. He's capable of that little bit of creativity that produces something.
It was a coin toss for me with Abada and Forrest, but I work on the yellow jersey premise that Abada didn't really do anything wrong, and he scored a wonderful goal against Alloa, so confidence is high and he's rediscovering a wee bit of form, so I would be perfectly happy with Forrest in the starting lineup too, but Abada just got the nod. But again, I don't make those calls, the manager does. That's why he gets paid the big money for that. I'm sure he watches this and bases it on it, to be fair. Now, Alison, I was laughing yesterday. He was asked a question about the opening day game, and Ange was like, "This is the fourth time I've played them, mate." You know what I mean? When does that negate itself? You know, and I think it was just the kind of premise that they were returning to Tynecastle first day of the season, all that, and he just said, "Look, we were an entirely different animal back then," and I believe that to be the case, eh?
Yeah, I think when you look at where Celtic were then and where they are now, they've come on, not just in terms of personnel, but also in terms of performances. I think they were very much on the back foot. I think Kyogo was introduced to his teammates at lunchtime that day. I think he came off the plane, had a team lunch, and then was given a place on the bench. I think Carl Starfelt had just arrived. Players were just going out. I think it was a team in flux and a team in very much in transition. The window was still open. They'd just gone out of the Champions League. There was all sorts going on. I think it's a much more settled team since then. Yeah. I think it's a more confident team, I think, from that opening night of the season. I think there's a very clear strategy, a clear vision. There are players who have been introduced since then who have been impactful, who have offered a fairly compelling contribution. And I think you would look to a few of them tonight. I'm thinking of Jota, to maybe come up with something. I wonder how match fit Jota is after being out for so long, whether or not he's capable of going the 90 minutes. But if he starts, he is a player that has been fairly inspirational for Celtic so far this term, given what he's contributed in terms of goals and assists. And I think those wide areas could be critical this evening for Celtic.
Now, Giakoumakis, big opportunity for him, isn't it? These are the games you repay your transfer fee, isn't it? And you step up to the mark and you step up to the plate and you produce something. He's got the opportunity because he's the only striker that Celtic have at their disposal. He has to grasp it, doesn't he, Alison?
I'm sure he'll feel that way too. I think it's been a very frustrating start for him in terms of the staccato nature of his career, of coming into a new club and finding it hard to establish himself in the first team, and then obviously picking up an injury at a point when he probably would have featured given the injury problems that were evident even before then. I'm sure he'll be itching just to get a sequence of games, to get a run in the team and just to work on his own touch and his own sharpness. I thought he took his goal well on Saturday against Alloa. I thought it was a clever finish. I thought it was decent touch, good movement. He could have had another one straight after it. I'm sure he'll be keen to take his chance when it's here, because when everyone is fit and available, I think he'll know he has a fight on his hands to start. So he really needs to grasp the opportunity that's in front of him just now and showcase what he's got. And I think he is a slightly different striker from what is available to Celtic. I think he offers scope to change the way they play, and he'll be desperate just to come in and try and make an impact now.
I made the point yesterday that if Hearts make it that kind of game, then it could be to Giakoumakis' benefit, that rough and tumble, up and at them type of thing, and not that Celtic will ever consider going long, but there is that option. He can be used as a target man type guy,
Yeah, and or even just in terms of bringing the ball into play and opening up a bit of space for people around about him. I think it will be quite a physical game tonight. I think I think you know what to expect when you're going through to Tynecastle. I think the intensity will be there from the off. I think it will be quite similar to the Alloa game, just in terms of Hearts wanting to get into Celtic's faces, for want of another word, to make it as difficult as possible. I think it will be a very physical, very robust encounter.
Is Alloa-esque entered the football lexicon dictionary yet? I think it will be Alloa-esque tonight, Alison, at Tynecastle. It usually is, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you absolutely know what to expect. Celtic teams know what to expect going through to Tynecastle. There's obviously a particular kind of tension there. I think I think Hearts will relish the opportunity on their own surface, backed by a decent crowd. I'm not sure if they've sold all seats now after restricting some of the Celtic fans going through. I think yesterday they still hadn't sold all the seats. You would hope it is a sellout, I think, because it's diluted. I think the last thing you'd want to do is to go and play and there's empty seats at all. I think it'd be very frustrating from a Celtic point of view too, given the fact that numbers were restricted and that Celtic would have taken those tickets. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of numbers are in the ground. But I think Celtic know what they're walking into. I think they're experienced enough to know what the atmosphere will be like. I think good players feed off of that. They enjoy the energy of it.
Yeah.
We spoke of it. I feel like we spoke of it repeatedly when we were in lockdown last term and how much we missed it and how it affected games. So I think it gives a certain kind of energy to the crowd, which feeds off. It's almost circular. It feeds into the players and the performance too. And as we've said before, I think if you want to consider yourself as championship ready and a genuine contender, then you have to go to places like Tynecastle and you have to find a way to win.
David Bradley's got it first, regular contributor. Cheers, David. Jota plays, we win, Alison. You touched upon that. You see how match fit he is, but he could be vital tonight, couldn't he?
Yeah, absolutely. I think he could be. I think these are the players that you're looking to come in and just make a fairly telling contribution and just open the game up a bit for you.
You and Boy Martin comes in. We've been banging on about this as well. And Ange has too. Our biggest weakness of late is not scoring enough of the chances we create. Be nice to put that right tonight. That's a big thing for Celtic, isn't it, Alison?
I think it's been a real Achilles heel this season, to be honest with you. I think there are umpteen games that you could list off the top of your head where points have been dropped and you consider the possession levels and chances. I'm thinking of that Dundee United game at Celtic Park. I think Celtic hit the woodwork maybe 3 times in that game. Thinking even of the recent game in Paisley just before Christmas against St Mirren. I think was it 83% or 86% possession or something like that. I think those types of games where teams have camped in and made restricted the space, I think Celtic have toiled. I'm thinking of Livingston too. I think Celtic have struggled to manipulate space to find a way in behind, and it's where you really need your creative players to come up with something, and also players round about them to be switched on to that and to be alert to it, to have a bit of intelligence, a bit of thought in terms of movement, and because you only need one moment just to try and exploit that.
Frank Brennan comes in and says, Allah roughed us up and Hearts will be aspiring to do the same with slightly better players. And so always the early goal that Angeball requires demands we must get. If we don't, it's behind the sofa stuff. And Chill Pill comes in and says, high tempo start tonight is a must for us. It seems to be the ones where Celtic have started brightly, that they've done the damage early, Alison, and got that early goal and relaxed upon it.
Yeah, I think when you look at the last 6 months or so, I think the difference in games can be determined by how they start. I think getting an early goal definitely tends to settle things. I think the longer the game goes, the more it obviously would play into Hearts' hands to keep it tight and keep it restricted. I think it changes the nature and complexion of a game, any game, I think, when you get off to a positive start and when you get a goal, because it always opens the game up a bit, which plays into Celtic's hands, which I think why it can be so important to start on the front foot and to start well.
Edward Wyavos comes in and says, if we win and Giakoumakis scores, we can all put that miss behind us. I'm clearly talking about the penalty miss against Livingston. Now, Alison, I wanted to just touch upon yesterday. Very sad news that Wim Jansen lost his battle with dementia at 75. He was only there for a season at Celtic, but it was a season that mattered to most Celtic supporters of my age and even older. What he achieved was enormous. Manager, leader, legend, Wim Jansen, he stopped 10 in a row and he preserved the Jock Steins 9 in a row record, slice of history that has been equal but not bettered. And a lot of Celtic supporters were sharing their stories of that day yesterday, and it was just wonderful to see. And thoughts to Wim Jansen, his family, and I wrote my own tribute to him on the Celtic Way and posted it on Facebook, and people can read that if they've got the time. But yeah, by all accounts, a wonderful man, Alison. But will be remembered as the man who stopped the 10 and the man who granted the gift of Henrik Larsson on Celtic supporters. Not bad to be remembered for, eh?
I think he'll be remembered fondly. You know, he was at the club for a very short time, but made a particularly lasting impact for those two reasons that you've just mentioned. I think for me, it also brings into question once more. I think 75 it's no real age at all. I think it's another player with a dementia illness that you think it just raises questions again about the propensity for these illnesses and diseases further on and later in life with those who've had a career in football. And I think it's something that needs to be properly addressed and properly looked at. Because I think when you look at the percentages of former players who are at risk of dementia, it's particularly high when you compare it to regular levels of the population. But in terms of his impact at Celtic, I think it's without question. I think you heard Steven Gerrard last week talk about what it meant to him to do the same at Rangers and how, you know, what he takes from that and what he'll be remembered from it. And I think it's exactly the same for Wim Jansen and stopping the magnitude of that title, delivering the first championship in a decade for Celtic, and it was a particularly fraught season, real kind of topsy-turvy roller coaster season, went all the way to the last game of the campaign. I think it was on edge all the way through. It was never assured, and also when you look back at the deal that took Henrik Larsson to Celtic and the clause in his contract that meant that Celtic got him for 650 grand. I think, I don't think you'll better that one.
No, I don't think there's been a better piece of transfer business in transfer history. But maybe I'm the green tinted specs on, but my goodness. And Johan Cruyff paid him a wonderful tribute and said he's one of only 4 people who you would listen to when they spoke about football. I do wonder who the other 3 are, but if you're in Johan Cruyff's top 4, you've got something about you. And you spoke to him a couple of times, didn't you, Alison? And we spoke off air, and you just said he was a decent man.
Yeah, I wouldn't profess to know him in any capacity at all. I think I interviewed him on a professional basis a couple of times. When I worked at Celtic and when I worked at the Evening Times and the Herald, I always found him fairly easy to speak to. He took a call. I think I'd spoke to him one time about Henrik Larsson, maybe towards the end of Larsson's time at Celtic and just what he'd achieved. And he was all. I think he remembered his own time at Celtic fondly, and I remember he was back. I think he came back for a few games fairly recently, maybe 4 or 5 seasons ago. I think he was back for a game. But I think he'll be well assured of his place in Celtic folklore.
There's that wonderful picture, Alison, of the two of them celebrating in '98 and Henrik's glancing to him, and I think he's got the kind of lid of the championship trophy on the top of his head, and it's just it's an enduring image, isn't it? I think most people will take that from the 1998 campaign and just seeing the two of them and what they brought and the kind of unbridled joy that they brought to the Celtic supporters.
Yeah, I think it was just such an important title for Celtic to win. I think it was a kind of be-all and end-all title, especially after the decade that had gone before it. I think it was just that I don't think you could underestimate just how important it was to Celtic. And then, of course, in typical Celtic fashion, he won a title and 2 days later he was away because of all sorts of unrest that was going on behind the scenes. And, I think it maybe just encapsulated that whole decade at Celtic, but what was left, the legacy of that time, of course, was you had players like Paul Lambert and Henrik Larsson, players who went on to make a fairly compelling contribution, get into a new millennium and a new chapter, and a new generation of Celtic, a new modern look Celtic. These guys almost bridged the gap between the old and the new.
I spoke to Paul Lambert last week for the big interview series, and Paul Lambert said something to me that he said that he doesn't think that Wim's team and Wim himself got enough credit for winning that title, and there is not enough reference to it at Celtic Park, and he reckons that there should be more made of it and that he should be celebrated and lauded more. I think that's probably more poignant now than it's ever been, and I guess it's over to Celtic to maybe do something in that front. But that kind of saddened me a wee bit when Paul said that. To hear that when you go to Celtic Park and you don't see too much about them, and yeah, maybe that's something that could be addressed as well, Alison, moving forward.
Yeah, I'm sure it's something that they'll definitely consider. I think when you look at the surrounds of the stadium, when you look at the fairly all the colourful chapters that are showcased all around the perimeter of the stadium, I think I'm not sure if I think there is one up there of that afternoon, but yeah, it could maybe come to a bit more prominence.
And on that poignant and sad note, we'll offer our condolences to the Jansen family, and we'll hope that Celtic honour them tonight by beating Hearts at Tynecastle. Thanks, Alison, for your contribution. Always enjoy it. Thanks for the contributors' comments. We always enjoy them too. We try and read as many as we can. We'll see what comes. We'll see what happens tonight. All the best. Have a good day.
Cheers, Tony.